constant topic of discussion during Obama's week-long visit to Asia is a nation he did not even visit, China. We have two guests with us to take a closer look at this trip and what it means for China. Zhou Jingxing is a former political counselor at the Chinese embassy in the United States. He is joining us from Beijing. And Scott Bates is here in the studio with me. He's the president at the Center for National Policy. That is a public policy think tank here in Washington. Before that, he spent 20 years working on Capitol Hill. Mr. Zhou, why don't I start with you? China doesn't seem very happy about this interchange with the Philippines. What would you say is China worried about with this relationship, this change in relationship?
Well, I think that what China is worried about is that any outside forces or moves that may not be consistent with the trend of the Asia-Pacific region. Right now, the defining feature of this region is peace and stability and development, and a lot of countries are yearning for that. And I think any country outside of this region, and if they are going to make any move, and I think they should move in that direction. And I think that the claimed aim for the president's visit to the four countries in Asia is to help the countries in this region to address those 21st century problems. But enhanced military alliance and defense treaties is so 20th century. And natural disasters and counterterrorism, and those issues are global issues, and they are also transporter issues, and they cannot be settled by bilateral military arrangement.
All right, Scott, you heard Barnaby Lowe talking about the 90s, the Philippines kicks the United States out. Why this sudden relationship in terms of what it might do with the relationship between the United States and China?
Well, what's interesting is that every one of the relationships the U.S. has in the region, the U.S. just presents themselves as a willing partner. So the Philippines has its own interests, the U.S. has its own interests, and, for example, right now is different than the 1990s. I think that when you're looking at how the U.S. engages in the region, the U.S. is trying to engage ASEAN, which is a regional collection of 10 states, and work regionally with ASEAN, also with the East Asian summit nations, and also with TPP, trying to create a rules-based economic order across the Pacific that unites nations. So that's not really the bilateral piece. You always have to have your relationship with individual partners, but it is in the American long-term strategic interest to have this network of cooperative states.
You're talking about engagement, and yet there's no trip to China. Was that a mistake?
No, I don't think so. President Obama's met with Chinese officials quite often, and he had to miss 2 trips to Southeast Asia previously, and to North Asia as well, that were not scheduled to go to China. So this is kind of making up for lost time.
Mr. Zhou, was it a missed opportunity not to go to China as well, in your estimation?
Well, I think that China and the United States have a very frequent contacts at various levels, from the top level down to the working level in the Foreign Ministry and the Defense Ministry, and across the government agencies between the two countries. So communications is very effective. And I think that China and the United States are also working very hard together to build the new type of a relationship between major powers, which features equality, mutual benefit, and also non-confrontation and effective communication. I think that if the two countries can work in that same direction, and then we will have a good and better relationship between the two countries.
Mr. Zhou, joining us from Beijing, thank you for your observations. Scott Bates here in the studio.